Listen closely, traveler. What I am about to share with you is not the chirping of a young scholar, eager to show off bookish quotes. No, what you are hearing now is the breath of an old monk, seasoned by time, worn by silence, whose steps have long echoed on the stone path of life. This is not a tale divided by neat chapters, because life itself knows no chapters. It flows like a river through gorges and valleys, each twist a continuation of the last, every bend echoing the turns already taken. Now, let us talk about cowardice. It is easy to scorn it, to see it as something foul stuck to your sandals, something to scrape off with a sneer. But those who have walked a few more miles, who have tasted both steel and stillness, will tell you otherwise. Cowardice is not the enemy of courage. It is its shadow. And where there is light, there must also be shadow. Cowardice is not born of weakness. It is the child of not knowing. It shows up when the heart has not yet been tempered, when the mind trembles before the unknown like a bamboo stalk shaking in a typhoon. To understand cowardice, do not run with the mob. Instead, walk slowly through the centuries, and there, in the silence between sword strikes, you will find a man, Musashi. Miyamoto Musashi was not simply a swordsman whose name rolled through the mountains of feudal Japan like distant thunder. He was a mirror, reflecting the fears, the doubts, the shadows that every human carries. Watch any of his battles, and you'll see more than a clash of blades. You'll see a man grappling with himself. Musashi did not reject fear. He unsheathed it like a sword, looked it dead in the eye, and said, "Speak." Cowardice, he once said, is not a moment. It is a path. It is the act of fleeing from growth. It is turning away from who you might become. Every duel was a breath, the inhale of fear, the exhale of clarity. Back in those blood-soaked dawns, when the rising sun spilled red across dusty roads, a samurai lived in every moment. He knew to hesitate for even a blink was to become a ghost in someone else's memory. In such a world, cowardice was not just shameful, it was a teacher. A samurai who could hear his fear as one hears the cry of a crane in the fog might live to fight another day. But the one who gave in to that fear rotted nameless in forgotten fields. Musashi walked alone, not because he feared loyalty, but because he bowed to no one, not to lords, not to titles, not even to schools. He followed the wind, not banners.
He did not crave approval. He sought no titles. His war was a war of spirit. And his art, his kenjutsu, was not forged in academies or polished halls. It was honed in solitude, in silence, in the presence of wind and stone. His sword only rose after his mind had already claimed victory. Until you have conquered yourself, he would say, you are not even worthy of the fight. That, my friend, is why others feared him, not the swordsmen themselves, but the demons they saw staring back at them when Musashi stood before them. Do not imagine he was born wise. Far from it. He was hot-tempered, rash, he feared, he failed. But that fire of youth was the forge of his soul. Every scar made him quieter, not because the fire went out, but because it went deeper. Musashi used fear not as an excuse to flee, but as fuel. He hammered every defeat into a blade that cut not through flesh, but through doubt. His true weapon did not gleam under the sun. His mind, that was the blade that never dulled. He spent time in shadows, pondering, reflecting. He sought not victory, but truth. His real enemies were not men, but ego, pride, anger. If you wield the sword but do not master yourself, he said, you are nothing more than a chained dog. He did not strike, he revealed. His two-sword style, Niten Ichiru, was more than a tactic. It was a teaching. One sword faced the world, the other faced the self. One fought battles, the other offered insight. They did not compete, they danced. And when their rhythm finally found harmony, a warrior was born, not of flesh, but of flow. This was not combat, this was the breath of the universe made visible. He retreated into solitude not out of fear, but out of listening. In silence, he did not hear the world, he heard himself. And in that quiet, among moss and wind and mountain light, he discovered this: fear is not an enemy, it is a voice of the spirit hungry for growth. He did not run from it, he sat beside it and asked, "What do you want to teach me?" And fear became a guide. Solitude does not take you away from the world, it prepares you to return to it. And Musashi returned not as a man, but as a mountain, steady, tempered. He understood then, the true fight is not reaction, but anticipation. And fear loses its grip when you are ready for anything.
Let me tell you now of a man whose wisdom was not carved into marble, but into silence, solitude, and the edges of steel. Toward the end of his life, Miyamoto Musashi, the legendary swordsman who walked the path alone, penned 21 principles. He called them the Dokudo, the way of walking alone. But these were not mere rules, scribbled by a man hoping to leave behind a legacy. They were distilled life, bone truth, the marrow of his years. These were not instructions for how to win duels, they were instructions for how to live. And oddly enough, even though they come from a samurai of feudal Japan, they may just be the sole medicine our digital, distracted world is starving for. Accept life as it is. Musashi warned against indulgence, against the fruitless chase for comfort and excess. Today, surrounded by apps promising happiness and influencers selling serenity in 30-second videos, his voice cuts through like a bell. Happiness is not in the having, it is in the freedom from wanting. You do not have to chase more to find enough. You only need to stop running. Be impartial. Do not envy, do not regret, do not hold hostility. In a world where comparison is currency and social media makes everyone else's life look like a filtered utopia, this teaching is revolutionary. Resentment shrinks the soul. Envy steals your presence. Musashi invites us to take back our clarity. Do not fear death. Musashi believed that accepting mortality was the gateway to a fully lived life. In modern terms, live as though no one is watching. Speak the truth, even if your voice shakes. Create what matters, even if it fails. Do not let the fear of ending stop you from beginning. Pursue minimalism. In the age of infinite upgrades and storage units, Musashi's rule, own nothing unnecessary, feels radical. He wore simple robes, carried what he needed, possessed no fluff. Today that might look like clearing your inbox, deleting half your apps, or letting go of the possessions that possess you. Simplicity is not lack, it is precision. Train relentlessly. Musashi believed in daily refinement of body, of mind, of soul. Today that might be strength training, or journaling, or therapy, or mindfulness. Anything that sharpens you, not to become perfect, but to become whole. His seminal work, the Book of 5 Rings, speaks in the language of the elements: earth, water, fire, wind, void. Each ring is more than metaphor, it's a mirror. Water, be adaptable. Be like water taking the shape of its container, he wrote. Flexibility is not weakness, it is wisdom. In business, in relationships, in personal crisis, the one who bends does not break. Fire, strike with conviction. He did not mean this only with a blade. He meant act with clarity. Make decisions and own them. Indecision is the thief of power. In today's world, we call it confidence.
In Musashi's, it was survival. Void. Flow. The highest skill, he taught, is to act without hesitation, not from impulse, but from such deep integration that body and spirit become one. What modern psychology calls the flow state, Musashi called it emptiness. And what does that look like today? Imagine you are about to give a high-stakes presentation. Instead of choking back the fear, ask, "What exactly am I afraid of?" Musashi said, "If you do not know where the strike will land, you are already defeated." Or you are walking into a difficult conversation. Plan not your script, but your awareness. Study the terrain, understand the other's triggers, anticipate, then act, not from emotion, but from strategy. Even decluttering your workspace or taking a day offline, that too is Musashi. Do not own what is not essential. He sought solitude, not to escape, but to listen, to train, to hear what the noise of society drowns. Think of your digital detox, your long walk, your moment of silence in the morning. That too is the way. Musashi painted in his later years. He wrote poetry. He turned the sword into a brush. Creation is also a battle, one against the inertia of fear, one stroke at a time. He did not win because he never lost. He won because he never quit, because he learned, because he endured. His true duel was never with an opponent. It was with the part of himself that wanted to hide. You might think his world was different, swords, honor, blood on the road, but you too face battle, and your enemy wears many faces: anxiety, self-doubt, distraction, despair. Musashi still whispers, "Courage is not the absence of fear, it is action in spite of it. Wisdom is not the absence of error, it is the willingness to learn from it. The path is not in grand gestures, but in daily sharpening. Every moment, every decision, every breath is a swing of the blade." He wrote, "In 1,000 days, begin. In 10,000 days, master." He broke the rules, deliberately arrived late to duels, fought with boat oars. He disoriented his enemies not just with force, but with unpredictability. He said, "If you understand how your opponent thinks, you have already won." Musashi was not brutal, he was precise. Courage is not rage, it is refinement. He accepted impermanence, he accepted death, and in that acceptance, he found freedom. He smiled at the end, not because he conquered death, but because he understood it. And his final victory was not in cutting flesh, but in cutting through illusion. He lives not in the sword, but in the silence between battles. And his legacy is this: you are not here to defeat the world, you are here to find yourself in it.
Let us talk now, not of ancient battles on distant fields, but of modern duels waged in fluorescent-lit offices, over keyboards instead of katanas. Fear has not gone extinct, it has simply changed shape. The weapons are different, the battlefield's quieter, but the war rages on. And Musashi? He lives still, not in flesh, but in principle, in silence, in strategy. His teachings are not museum pieces, they are tools for now, for this world of constant alerts, tight deadlines, anxious commutes, and 3 a.m. spirals of self-doubt. He gave us more than swordsmanship. He gave us a blueprint for facing the most relentless opponent we will ever know, ourselves. Step 1. Sit with the fear. Musashi did not start with an attack. He started with observation. He looked fear in the eye. He studied it, understood its shape, its rhythm. That still holds true. You have a presentation. Your hands sweat. Your voice quivers. Instead of distracting yourself or cracking nervous jokes, do this. The night before, sit quietly. Ask, what exactly am I afraid of? Embarrassment? Forgetting your words? That awful silence after a bad joke? Write it down. Name it. Musashi taught, if you do not know where the strike will come from, you are already defeated. Naming the fear is the beginning of clarity, and clarity disarms panic. Step 2. Replace emotion with preparation. Awareness is the start, but preparation is the sword. Musashi studied terrain. He knew the sun's angle, the wind's scent. He planned. Facing a difficult conversation at work, prepare like a strategist. Think through their personality. Prepare alternatives. Know your points and know your purpose. Modern anxiety loves chaos. Strategy brings stillness. As Musashi said, victory is won before the battle. Step 3. Use unpredictability to shatter the pattern. Musashi used an oar instead of a sword. He delayed his arrival. He played with expectations because fear feeds on predictability. If it knows what you will do, it knows how to trap you. In our world, this might look like subverting your own perfectionism. You are an artist, afraid to post your work? Share an unfinished sketch. Let imperfection breathe. You are prepping for an interview? Lead with curiosity instead of over-rehearsed answers. Come in with questions. Disrupt the fear's script. The point is not rebellion for its own sake. The point is liberation. Unpredictability says to fear, you do not hold the script. Step 4. Train in peace, not in panic. Musashi did not only train for battle. He trained because training was the path. His strength was not forged in duels. It was built in the quiet hours, over and over, in the repetition, in the refinement. Want confidence? Start small. Every evening, write 3 lines about your day. What did you do well? Where did you falter? Where were you honest? This is not a journal. It is a dojo, a daily sharpening of the inner blade. Discipline is not about harshness, it is about rhythm. Even a small step counts, so long as you keep walking. Step 5. Seek solitude to hear yourself again. Musashi retreated into caves, not to vanish, but to return wiser. We live in noise. Notifications, timelines, conversations, crises. And in that storm, fear multiplies. Give yourself 30 minutes. No phone, no podcast, no checklist. Just sit. Sip tea. Watch the sky change. In that space, you will remember what fear wants you to forget. You are not broken. You are just crowded. Solitude is not emptiness. It is the forge where clarity is born. Step 6. Let go to move forward. Musashi taught, do not resist the current. Become the water. You lose a job. Panic sets in. But what if that loss is the start of something? Ask, what can I learn now? What new paths are visible in the fog? Where fear grows, often potential hides. Fear is not the end. It is the frontier. Step 7. Create as a way through. Musashi painted in his later years. He wrote. He practiced calligraphy, not as decoration, but as battle. Art became his other sword. Today you may feel anxious, out of control, frayed. Try this. Draw, scribble, strum a guitar, write a bad poem, not for others, for yourself. Art is not talent. It is about connection. It is how we speak to fear in a language it cannot mock. Expression is not weakness. It is spiritual self-defense. Musashi's way today. He did not run from fear. He sat beside it and listened. He did not train for glory. He trained for readiness. He did not fight for pride. He fought to understand. Musashi's legacy is not in the duels he won.
It is in the truths he lived. That courage is a discipline. That fear is a teacher. That the path is not a performance, it is a practice. You face your own battles, and no, they may not draw blood, but they cost sleep, self-worth, peace. Let Musashi walk beside you, not as a ghost of war, but as a quiet, steady presence, a reminder. Do not deny the fear. Study it. Do not chase victory. Prepare for clarity. Do not cling to the outcome. Refine the process. And above all, keep walking. Step by step, stroke by stroke, breath by breath. That is how warriors are made, even now.
The warrior's way through failure. Musashi and the inner battle. So, what do you do when you have already failed? Let me tell you something, friend. Even Miyamoto Musashi, the undefeated swordsman, the lone wolf of feudal Japan, he too stumbled. He made mistakes. He lost. But it was there in the ashes of defeat that he discovered something more powerful than victory: resilience. You mess up a project, you embarrass yourself. Maybe you feel shame crawl up your neck like a spider in church. You sit alone afterward, wondering if you are a fraud, a failure, a fool. But then, maybe, just maybe, you take a breath and ask, what can I learn here? What could I do differently next time? If you do that, my friend, you have already won. Because failure is not the end. It is the second strike of the flint, the one that lights the fire. Musashi once said, "Failure is a blade with which you carve a new path." That was not poetry. That was survival. That was truth. Now, let us talk about masks. Today, it is easy to get lost in them. We perform confidence. We cosplay success. We rehearse our wisdom. But Musashi taught the opposite. Be real. Let your fear be seen, not as a weakness, but as an honest guest. Let your doubt come to the table, but do not let it run the show. This is the true path. Not to be perfect, but to be true. Not to be fearless, but to be stronger than fear. When you live that way, sword or no sword, you are already a warrior. Not on the outside, on the inside. So go. Look fear in the eye. And remember, the real fight is never out there. It is always in here. And if you are still breathing, you are still fighting. So how do you live this, day by day? You start small. It's morning. You wake up and already your gut tightens, anxiety knocking on the door before coffee. Instead of grabbing your phone and diving into noise, you pause. You breathe. You ask yourself, what am I feeling? Where in my body does this fear live? You don't try to fix it. You observe it. That is the first lesson of Musashi, the art of seeing clearly. Then comes planning. Before a tough meeting, don't just recite bullet points. Imagine the terrain. Where are the pressure points? What questions might blindside you? Visualize the conversation. This is not paranoia. This is strategy. Musashi, before a duel, studied the wind, the light, the terrain. Your terrain today is the mood in the room, the emotional weather of the person across from you, the power dynamics you can sense if you listen. Now, what if fear paralyzes you anyway? Then, change the angle. Let's say you're afraid of rejection. Ask yourself, what is the absolute worst that could happen? Spoiler alert, it's probably not the end of the world. Musashi once fought 10 men by himself and won because he didn't follow the expected script. He showed up late on purpose. He fought with a boat oar instead of a sword.
He broke the pattern, and that broke his enemy's mind. So how do you break the pattern? If you're an artist afraid to share your work, post a sketch instead of a masterpiece. Show your rough edges. If you're a programmer dreading an interview, show up asking questions instead of just answering them. Flip the script. The mind of fear doesn't know what to do with unpredictability. But all of it, depends on one thing: discipline. Musashi didn't become legendary overnight. His power came from daily, quiet work. 10 minutes of meditation in the morning, 5 minutes of journaling at night. One small victory over yourself today. And when you live this way, something curious happens. The fear doesn't vanish, but it stops driving the bus. Sometimes you may even feel grateful for it, because fear points to where you are growing. It's a compass that says, here is where life is calling him to show up fully. And then maybe, just maybe, you will understand what Musashi came to understand. True victory is not the absence of fear. It is walking forward anyway. It is saying yes or no with clarity, not performance. It is making each choice, not for applause, not to please, but because you are awake. Even in a world without swords, you are still a warrior. But your battlefield is within. Your opponent? The part of you that wants to shrink. Stay safe. Stay invisible. Musashi did not defeat enemies. He defeated himself. And that's why he became a legend. Not for glory, but for peace. The real fight is inside, he said. And if you, traveler, can hear that, you have already taken your first step. So, go. Fear will not disappear, but neither should you. Every step forward is a cry from the soul that says, I am still alive. And that voice is sacred. So breathe, look, act, and remember, your path has already begun. Why turn back now?